Good morning again. I'm not the biggest morning person in the world, but I'm here. So I'm gonna show you, I think we're gonna finish this set of cabinets up today. So we still have to putty and sand the face frames. And I have to add these little pieces in all of these little areas right here. And what that does is it just keeps dust, like right here. If I didn't add this little piece of wood, I didn't cut it yet, but if I don't add a little piece, then and it stays just like this, dirt and stuff could get back here and it would be hard to clean. So I'm gonna go cut all of these to fit inside of there, and then I'll staple it down, then I'll putty everything and belt sand all the faces of the face frames. So this is what I meant by adding the little pieces, and it's just so when it's like this on the ground, stuff can't get back up inside of there. So I still have to do these are the 3 cabinets, and then I'll be finished adding them little pieces. Then I'll putty them, I'll sand them, and one other thing I have to do is I have to run a flush trim bit right here along the edge of this, but I'll show that in a little bit.
Blaze just wants to be loud.
So what I'm doing is I'm using this flush trim bit, which serves 2 purposes. First of all, we let the face frame stick over just a hair, like maybe a 32nd or a 64th. So then we can take it to where it's perfectly flush with the side of the cabinet. But the other reason for doing it is if you look at this bit, it's got this little V in it. And that little V sits right in between the face frame and the side of the cabinet. And the reason for that is because lumber expands and contracts, whereas plywood may expand and contract a little, but not nearly as much. So in the past, when you would paint the cabinets, the side right here, when the face frame would expand and contract, it would break the paint line. It would leave a crack in your paint. So by doing this, painters usually run a little bead of caulk inside of there, which doesn't cover the whole thing, but it expands this wood to expand and contract. And because caulk is a little flexible, it keeps the paint from cracking. So that's the... Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm puttying all the holes and everywhere where there's a joint. I'm gonna putty it, and I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna sand it. And when I get finished, it should look like one solid piece of wood. This putty, interestingly enough, is called Famo wood. I know it's upside down. It's because when you're storing it, you're supposed to store it upside down. But it's actually made in Louisiana. I thought that was pretty neat. But this is the good stuff. This is the stuff you want to use. Woo! Woo! Let's go! It's recording. Alright, ladies again. So what I'm about to show you is, so now I got to belt sand the faces of all these cabinets, and then we'll come back with a orbital sander. But what I'm doing is you go this way first, because it's going to leave scratch marks against the grain. But then when you come this way, you can take most of those scratch marks out, and then the orbital sander will get them out. So I'll show you in this cabinet real quick what I mean. is what I meant by taking the scratch marks out. I'm gonna sand the rest of it later, but I don't want you guys to have to watch all of that. So let me just do this top piece right here. So if you can see it, it left scratch marks going across the grain. So when I come this way, if I stay right on that edge, it should take most of those marks out. Okay, so after we belt sand everything, we'll come back with an orbital. Then we'll break all of our edges with a sanding block. And then all we have to do is set the height for the adjustment for the drawers. And then this job will be, well, sorry, Ben's also making all of the doors. I've already showed how to make a video making raised panel doors. We're making flat panel doors in this case. So, again, if you want to see how I make doors, I've made, I think, 2 videos of that. So on the orbital sander, my brother's we're using 120 grit. And on the belt sander that I'm using, we're using 80 grit. I hope that helps. We're using 120 grit because it's going to be painted. If it was going to be stained, we'd even go down to 220 grit. But this is a paint grade job, and 120 is usually good enough, smooth enough. So Ben's putting our doors together. I just finished belt sanding this little job. My brother is foam sanding it with an orbital random sander, or random orbital sander, however you say it. Okay, what we're doing now is we're using this jig to set the heights of the drawers so that they're parallel with the face. So this jig goes in like this. And you can see that it's even with both of these rails. So if we put it in the back of the cabinet, that means the front and the back has to be perfectly straight or level because we're referencing off the front piece. So then we put these little blocks. Can you see that, Mark?
Yep.
We put these little blocks underneath, and on top we put a block like this. And that way these things can, oops, I dropped my nail gun. That way these things can float in the back, but they can't come up or down. And that's how we like to do it. That's good. Okay, so what my brother is doing now is those little blocks of wood that we put to hold up the pad out. He's putting a screw through the 1/4-inch back of the cabinet into those little blocks of wood. And that's going to keep them from being able to fall and makes them real strong. So that's the reason why we're doing that. And I guess I should have said we staple everything from the inside with some really big 1.5-inch staples. And the reason being is that we can just bend them over in the back, and then we know where to put our screw. So we're not missing and we're not having to measure. It's just a quicker way of doing things. Hope that makes sense. So again, once the drawer is in there, this pad out can slide back and can go back and forth to make sure that the drawer front sits flat on the cabinet. Okay, what I'm doing now is I'm drilling the holes and my doors for the hinges. So what I do is I push it against my stop. Make sure there's no trash behind it. Push it against my stop. Drill down so the Forstner bed is about flush with the surface of the wood. And then I do the other side. You can buy a machine that does this, but it's way cheaper than, well, the drill press was free. So I just made this little jig to put them in the same distance on both sides. Once I drill these holes, I'm gonna sand all the edges on my edge sander. So I'll show you what that looks like. But just to show you while I'm drilling these holes, it's so that these European style hinges fit inside. So I believe that is 1 7/8 of an inch. So that's what this bit is. So let me go ahead and edge sand it. And then we're almost finished with this job, but we still gotta sand the surfaces. So these are shaker style doors, which means they have a flat panel, and usually they don't have a profile on the edge. In this case, the customer didn't want it. But there is this little round over on the inside. This is where you gotta be careful, because it's real easy to burn ingrain. This piece is fine, but where there's ingrain, if you push too hard and try to take off too much too fast, it'll burn this. Okay, so all the doors are done. You can turn it off now. Now we're sanding all of the drawer fronts and the doors with our drum sander. Almost the last step before installation. We have this other jig right here that once we put it in there and we put the drawer on, it'll line it up just right every time. So that's what's happening right now. We use these screws, which are 1 1/8 inch, and they've got a Robertson's bit or a square head on them, so it locks in way better. I don't know if you can see that, but it's a square head, so it doesn't slip like a Phillips. And I'm getting ready to put the hinges on, or I've already started putting the hinges on. And then I just got to hang these doors, and tomorrow we should be able to go in and install this little kitchen job and be done. Okay, I just want to show you guys one more thing. The reason I make this back part back here on the pad out, the reason I make it to where it can float side to side is I'm cocking it at an extreme angle just to show you. So as you can see, the drawer front is touching on that side, but it's not touching on this side. Mark, hold this so they can see what I'm doing, please. Okay, so if that's the case, all I have to do is hit with the palm of my hand. It makes that whole back part move over, and then when I close it, it's perfect all the way across. So that's the reason why I let it float in the back, if that makes sense. So we're done with this job. Tomorrow I may or may not film us installing it. It all just depends on how much room we have in the kitchen, because there'll be 3 of us working. So this may be the last video, but there's how you build a small set of kitchen cabinets, or at least the base unit. She didn't have any uppers. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, leave me a comment and I'll try to answer. Thanks, bye.